Welcome to the Engaged Jain Studies Podcast, brought to you by Arihanta Institute. Listen to top figures in the fields of Jain studies, religious studies, vegan studies, and social justice discuss pressing issues of everyday relevance. Together, let's move beyond the realm of personal spiritual growth and connect philosophy, religion, and spirituality to the important task of caring for the well-being of society. Learn about your world and how to change it on the Engaged Jain Studies Podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to the Engaged Jain Studies Podcast. I'm Dr. Christopher Jain Miller here, and more importantly, I'm here to interview two very wonderful guests today, Dr. Pratik Bhansali and Vinita Dugad, who are coming to us from the Jain Vegan Initiative and EcoMo. So it's really wonderful to have you both on the podcast and to learn from you about the new course that you taught for us, Reimagining Sustainability. So we'll talk about that. But before we get into talking about the class and more on your background, can you just briefly tell me a little bit about yourself? Maybe we'll start with Pratik and then Vinita, if you don't mind, after that.
Thank you, Chris, for having us. So I came from India. I stayed in India since 2018 to finish my bachelor's and master's. And then I moved to the US to get my PhD. And around this time during the transition, I did notice a lot of difference in the environment, in the culture. And also my awareness about a lot of things increased, especially around animals, around the environment. So I started working during the pandemic, actually, we had something called the Jain Vegan Initiative started because everything was virtual. So we thought it's a good way to connect to people. So we started that. And also then China had its Ahimsa Eco-Vegan Committee. So I got involved with that last year. So we've been doing some work around animals and around the environment on that. And it's been interesting. So that's what prompted us. And of course, your invite to teach the course, that's what prompted us to go and talk a little bit about the environment. And we thought we should talk about some of the things that are not spoken of enough. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you, Pratik. And over to you, Vinita.
Hi, I'm Vinita, and I am staying in India first. So while I was doing my fashion designing course, I realized the amount of pollution, everything was created. And that particular moment, I turned into an environmentalist. And ever since, it's been 9 years now that I'm into environment and my consumption patterns have changed. And it helped me to build my own brand now, my own small business that is EcoMo, which looks into the sustainability part. So I've been an environmentalist for 9 years and continuing to spread awareness through different channels, through NGOs, through my videos, and through my brand.
Wonderful. So I'm familiar with the work that you both do then for Jain Vegan Initiative and EcoMo just from working with you. Pratik, do you want to say a little bit more about how the Jain Vegan Initiative emerged during the pandemic itself, why it emerged, and what is it all about? What's its mission?
So actually, the way it emerged was Sunny, Jain, Nisha, and a few other folks. They were on this newly propping up app called Clubhouse. That's where most of us met. And then we used to have a lot of discussions on Clubhouse around animal rights and a lot of other social issues in general, and also their intersections. And that's when we thought, hey, this is a good platform, maybe to just start engaging with people. And that was also around the time of pollution. I think it was 2021. And so that was around pollution. And we were like, okay, this sounds like a very good platform to push for veganism. There is a big gap, especially if you look into the Jain community. There's a big gap because we do talk about non-violence, but if we start looking at some of our actions, especially in the modern age, it's simply unacceptable. And that's when we started talking about maybe bringing more awareness into the Jain temples, into people, not the values, because the values are already there, as we have also mentioned in our course, but it's more about getting people to align with the values. And that's how we started. And then eventually we started moving some things to offline mode because it's not a very wise strategy to just rely on one app. And also it's not accessible to everyone. So just to be accessible, we started spreading more. Then we had a cookbook At this point of time, the cookbook has reached close to like 70,000 views or clicks at least. And there have been like close to 8 to 9,000 downloads. That was a purely vegan, Paryushan focused cookbook when Jains follow a lot of dietary restrictions. And the response made us believe that there is a lot of work that we should do in this area. And that's how we got started. And it was the same with the Ahimsak Eco-Vegan Committee, where Dr. Gina Shah had been working on it for years, and she kind of invited us to join her on that. So that's how those two things started. And we have taught another course, which was about Beyond Vegetarianism, which was specially focused on veganism. And then this course, of course, with Arianta and Ecomo, where we focus on the environmental issues, which again has a lot of intersections with the animal rights movement. But yeah, that's how JVI started, and we're hoping to be able to do more.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that background. And for our listeners who don't know, many of you probably already do, Jains are traditionally vegetarian, lacto-vegetarian. And so the rise of this Jain Vegan Initiative was essentially itself calling into the question the consumption of dairy within the community. And it was really wonderful to see it emerge, as you say, in 2021, kind of in those early stages of the pandemic, to see Jains kind of collectively and globally advocating for giving up dairy because of the manifold harms in dairy to the animals, the environment, human health, and everything that we know. And this is one of the high aims of the Jain tradition. It questions one of the things we do 3-4 times a day, which is eat, right? What do we eat? It has such a profound effect on all these things, and we do it so much, and we consume so much food, that it's really important that we pay attention to what we're eating. So I really appreciate this about the Jain tradition and about the Jain Vegan Initiative in particular, because it's calling into question something that Jains traditionally have eaten, which is a difficult thing to do, but also, as you say, it aligns with the values that Jains already have. So it's been wonderful to follow that. And I can see how, you taught that initial class for us, which was wonderful, Beyond Vegetarianism with Jain Vegan Initiative. So this is the second class that you've taught with us, Pratik. And it's really focused a lot on food, but it's also been very intersectional. And another thing I really appreciate about the Jain tradition and its philosophy is its commitment to living a very minimalist, non-attached lifestyle. And I think that's where kind of maybe, Vinita, you can tell us a little bit about Ecomo and living more sustainably, not only with regard to what we eat, but we also consume a lot of other things on a routine basis. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about Ecomo and what it is that Ecomo does with regard to looking at our consumption patterns.
So when I turned environmentalist, I would do my bare minimum. I would carry my own bags, and I realized that I need to consume less, everything. But the daily needs, the daily essentials, what were required, when I went to the market to look for them, they were very expensive. That's when I realized that capitalism has already entered the sustainability market. Everything was like, if you want to be sustainable, everything goes like 3 times more than the normal price of any goods that you buy, like the fast moving consumer goods. So with Ecomo, what happened is I didn't actually want to start Ecomo, but when I went to the market, that's when Ecomo started this product, but it also made people aware. If you look into what Ecomo tells buy something when you really need to buy anything. So that's how the whole Ecomo is. It's just not like me trying to sell my products or a brand trying to sell its products, but it is more about we want you to consume consciously and understand how your consumption patterns affect the environment. Be it related to your everyday products or be it related to your long-term products.
Great. Thank you, Vinita. Yes, I can see how creating a company that helps people consume in a better way, think about their consumptive choices in a better way, that really calls into question some of the throwaway culture of capitalism, could be such a wonderful addition to the world that we live in, given all the issues that we face with regard to environmentalism. And what I really appreciate about this course that you both have taught together, bringing together the thought of Jain Vegan Initiative, the thought of Ecomo, and the way that we consume anything, it's called Reimagining Sustainability. What would that mean, right? And the subtitle of the course is Jain Environmental Advocacy. And so this is really a Jain focus on how we can advocate better for the environment, live a more sustainable lifestyle. And it's coming from 2 Jains. And I think that's wonderful. People who are not only born and raised and living in the tradition, but also who have been around a lot, have a lot of life experience between India, between North America, and really have a kind of cosmopolitan sense of the issues at hand. So what I would like to do maybe now is walk our listeners through the curriculum of the course that you have offered on Arihant Institute. It's offered as a self-study course people can take online on our platform so they can get a sense of what the curriculum is like. There are a number of lessons here. So you have a total of 6 lessons built into this class. And the first one is called Jain Roots of Environmentalism, Nonviolence, Ahimsa. So we're talking about Ahimsa here. Can you tell me a little bit about the Jain roots of environmentalism? What do you mean by that? And how does that sort of lay the foundation for this course?
Yeah, sure. One important aspect of the course was, we actually talk about that in the first chapter. There are 2 things to the environment, right? One is kind of knowing what environmentalism is about. It's not about some distinct future, and it does not only impact us. And even when it impacts us, it's not like as straightforward as, the water levels are going to rise and all of us are going to drown or something like that. It's more nuanced, and different people feel different impacts, including non-human animals. And then the other part of it is, once you have this information, which you will probably have even on other platforms, what do you do with it? How do you practically transition? So now when you look at the first chapter, we talk about a few things essentially. One of them being the distinction between the climate, the environment, and how we are outpacing the rate of change with which the environment can adjust. To look into that, if you connect it to some of the Jain values, the core Jain values, you see a lot of them revolving around including everyone. By that, I mean including human beings, all animals, and all beings, basically. So that's the first part of it. So we have a few different things that we talk about when it comes to the modern environmental movement, right? Some of the concern is just about us. Hey, I live in a place where the environment is getting polluted, which is affecting me. So that's more of an egocentric point of view, even if you are environmentally focused. Then the other part is an anthropocentric point of view, where it's, hey, human beings are going to suffer. And even in the anthropocentric, some of it is going to be, does it talk about everyone, or does it only focus on like some of the groups? When it comes to like groups, specifically different groups of human beings bear the brunt of environmental harm differently. So that's one aspect, but it's still an anthropocentric point of view where we are still focused only on humans. And then there is an ecocentric point of view. Now, when you look at the values of Jainism, we do talk about samatha. We do talk about including everyone, even when it comes to ahimsa. The thought of ahimsa includes animals when you talk about not eating animals. When you talk about not harming animals, it also talks about not just cutting down trees, right? So if you look at that, it's more of an ecocentric approach. And that's what the first lesson kind of talks about, looking at ecocentric and finding these common roots. And by that, we do not intend to say that environmentalism is not spoken of in different philosophies. In philosophies all around the world, people have spoken about the environment. But we wanted to look at it from a Jain perspective, and that's why we did call it the Jain roots of environmentalism, where we connected some of these Jain principles.
Wonderful. Yes, I can definitely understand, being a professor of Jain studies, how you could really set the course up like this, because as we know, the Jain tradition really focuses on an interconnected web of life where everything affects itself. And it really calls into question what you're talking about, Pratik, which is the human egocentrism that all around the world causes us to behave in certain ways that affect one another, affect the environment, and it's all connected, right? So that really sets up the nonviolence as a foundation for what comes next. And what you really seem to do in this course is walk us through each of the 5 major vows and more as you move your way through the class. And the second lesson then brings us to Satya. So it's called the bigger issues and capitalism, truth, Satya. What are the bigger issues and capitalism? Why do we go from talking about the Jain roots of environmentalism to then talking about the bigger issues and capitalism? I think there is a reason, but I'd like to hear from you.
So yeah, Satya, when you look from the Jain perspective, Satya is truth, right? But when you look from the Jain perspective, it is so much not just what we do, what we can see, but a lot of things which are going in the background. We have to even focus on that. So in Satya, it's not just the truth that people that is going on in front of their eyes, but there are other truths like which are hidden from us and which are ignored by human beings. And this chapter talks completely on what is hidden from us. Like it talks about greenwashing, and then it talks about the ignorance by us, that is the capitalism makes us ignore a lot of things.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned a couple of things here. Greenwashing was one of the things, capitalism in general. Can you say a little bit more about what you mean by these things with regard to truth and why this is important from the Jain perspective to really pick apart and study in such careful detail?
Yeah, so when I talk about greenwashing, it is a way to trick people into, that is when I said the truth which is hidden from us. So greenwashing is the truth that is hidden from us. So in greenwashing, the brands would make things green, they'll show the packaging to be sustainable, and people get tricked into thinking that whatever they are doing, whatever they are consuming, they'll blindly consume thinking that it is sustainable. But is the product actually sustainable in a cardboard thing? And then they can know it works. That is what the whole greenwashing is. This is a capitalists who want to sell their product, like what has Coca-Cola done. Capitalism is like they wanted more money. They tried to they put the industries up there, and now they wanted to earn money out of it. And the moment people started realizing that it is polluting their rivers, it is polluting the environment, the bottles that Coca-Cola is producing is actually not going anywhere. Like the recycling, it is not getting recycled, it is not getting reused, it is going into trash and nothing is happening about it. So Coca-Cola is the one who has actually introduced the whole marketing team to talk about recycling, and it made people think that whatever Coca-Cola is going to sell, or whatever bottle Coca-Cola is going to sell, that it would be recycled or it would be consciously disposed of. It is not, the individual does not have to go ahead and will it not pollute, but it was just a marketing strategy. Today, Coca-Cola is the number one polluter, be it the industry-wise or be it the trash-wise or be it in the landfills. You'll find Coca-Cola bottles as the number one polluter.
Yeah, I really see what you're saying there, Vinita. Did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, and interestingly, if you look at the course, we have actual examples, including misleading advertisements from big companies, which have focused on some things that would make people feel better. So that's going to be an interesting thing even for the people who take the course to look into. Some of them are so alarming where it feels like, hey, this company has done something good for the environment, and it's like a big petroleum industry, right? And if you look into it, they had tons and tons of oil spilled in the oceans, destroyed a lot of marine life, which people didn't even know about enough, and people thought that they're already working on it, and that's leading to their basically leaning into people's ability to feel good about themselves, because we don't want to be uncomfortable in general, right? Then there's also a lot of fear mongering. If you look into it, it's tied with a lot of like the untrue nationalistic instinct that, hey, if we don't do this way, people are coming, environmentalists are coming to take away our, like the American or the Indian or whatever business away. So some of those things are tactics, fear-mongering tactics used by companies. There are misleading advertisements. How to spot the misleading advertisements, how to spot the misleading labels is also something that we have delved into. But capitalism is the base of all that's going wrong, because everything is driven by profit. And once you have that motive, everything else that we talk about, bringing more people to solve problem, that doesn't hold true, because people not only try to solve problem, but they also introduce some problems. So a lot of problems are actually like, they were actually solutions waiting for problems. That's what we did talk about in that chapter as well. Over to you, Chris.
Yes, wonderful. I see in this second chapter and lesson of the course that you're really looking at the bigger structural issues in society, the way that people are tricked into thinking things, the way that their psychology is being manipulated to be tricked into thinking that they're being sustainable while clearly they are not. And one of the things I really appreciate about the tradition, and this is under Satya, under truth, where you're talking about this, is that, you know, with regard to the Jain tradition and even the other Dharmic traditions, and you all know that my background is also in yoga studies as well, Satya and the kind of peeling away of the veil of that which is not true is a big part of the spiritual path, and being able to see through the kind of psychological tricks we're constantly being manipulated by is such an important step on all of these spiritual paths. So I think that sets it up really nice in lesson 2 for us to really question and be critical about the messaging that we're receiving from the corporate world that causes us to believe things that may not and probably are not true. And this brings us then to lessons 3 and 4, which are combined together here to really call into question the impact of individual lifestyle choices, the choices we make as individuals. And here you're really invoking the Jain vows of aparigraha, so non-possession, and asteya, not stealing, which obviously have a lot to do with the way that we as individuals consume and the effects that it has when we steal from the environment, steal from each other. And so given these big structural issues that you do in lesson 2, going into lesson 3 and 4, you do try to kind of show the actual way we can actually make a difference with our individual lifestyle choices. And I really appreciate that. And I wonder if one of you would elaborate on lesson 3 and or 4.
Yeah, sure. And we would actually talk about both of them in a combined way. If you look at the lessons, they are actually 2 parts of a similar thing, right? Now, when you look at aparigraha, Jain values or Jain philosophy has a great emphasis on aparigraha when it comes to like abstaining from things. When it comes to the idea of minimalism that we talk about today, not using something that you don't need. Even when it comes to food, even if you look at the monks, traditionally, the idea was to get food what you can, not go ahead and like just, go ahead and destruct and go ahead and fight for resources, but basically get resources, whatever you need, just have that resources. Even when it comes to other aspects of life, not just using even the clothes that they wear, they are like the minimalist clothes. So the idea there is simply to not take something that doesn't belong to you, which again ties into asteya as well. So we do talk about some of the things there. Interesting parts of that is when it comes to non-stealing, it does not only include taking things like money from someone, right? Displacing people. And we have linked it to some of the scriptures or some of the thoughts laid out by teachers where they talk about displacement of people, because displacement is nothing but you have people living there, you go ahead, you move them out, and then you build your industries onto that, or you build your homes onto that. Now, when you talk about displacement, that does not only mean displacement of human beings, it also includes displacement of animals. So when you go and destroy forests, you take resources from the forest that don't belong to you, that a lot of you don't even need. So if you follow aparigraha, if you follow minimalism, you will not go ahead and do that. And what you do is you steal the resources. In that process, you move out people. So Jain scriptures and Tattvartha Sutra, if you go to the chapter which talks about asteya, we say that it says, if you want to live somewhere where no one else is living at this point of time, which is an open land where you don't have to remove a lot of animals and you don't have to remove a lot of people. And that actually is also a meaning of non-stealing. So that's why both of these chapters tie into each other very well. Now, when it comes to the stealing part, it's very serious because a lot of people on this planet, the human persons, they do not have enough food to eat. And it's not that we have a real scarcity. We are over-consuming. People who have, they're over-consuming. And as a result, we have millions and millions of people go hungry because some of the food actually belongs to them. When it comes to asteya, it's again on 2 levels. You are taking resources instead of just eating plants. For example, if you talk about animal agriculture, instead of eating plants, you are feeding like multiple times more plants to animals and taking away their life, right? So you are causing more food to be basically used ineffectively. And then instead of that food going to other human beings which can be fed, you are consuming that food. So like that 1 calorie, instead of going to someone, you are using up 10 calories to convert that into 1 calorie for yourselves. So basically what you are doing is you are consuming more, which you shouldn't if you do follow aparigraha, and you are consuming something that should go to someone else. So and that's why we thought we would really tie these chapters into each other. That's what I would like people to look into when they go into these chapters. These real issues which tell you that environmentalism is not about getting a world which is an ideal world in the future, but these are some of the problems that are happening now as we speak.
Yeah, thank you, Pratik. I can definitely see how there's some interrelated social justice and environmental racism and environmental social justice issues mixed in with everything that you're saying here, in the sense that we're stealing from humans, we're stealing from animals, we're stealing from the environment. And it's all as a result of our need to accumulate and be possessive, which, of course, as you pointed out in Jain scriptures, is something that's seen as not good, not spiritually beneficial, and something we should ultimately, to the extent that we can, avoid. And that really sets you up in this course for lesson 5, where you're looking at the topic of environmental social justice and policymaking, calling into question violence around us. And here you're invoking the Jain concept of anumata. Would you like to say a little bit about environmental social justice and policymaking? What does this mean?
If you think about it, if you see a place where bombs are being dropped, like anywhere in the world, right, you would call it violence, which is happening in a lot of places around the world. But basically, throughout history, if you look at the world wars, if you look at like any wars, you would call it violence, right? Because it would kill a lot of people. Now, is it violence only because it kills people in a moment? Because some of the things that are causing environmental harm, they are killing many more people just gradually. And that is something what is called slow violence. And there was a book about it, right? And we did cite that book as well. So slow violence basically is, instead of just killing people instantly, you are systematically degrading their environment to induce harm, which spans across generation. Now, for example, if you are looking at lithium mining, when you look at lithium mining, a lot of brine is pumped from the earth for lithium. A lot of water is used to refine that, evaporate that, and then what you leave behind or what you dump onto that land is a lot of salts, right? So what you have done is you have taken something from the ground. Now, when you leave salt on that, who are the people using these lithium batteries? They are people who can afford, let's say, electric vehicles, right? So that's again an aspect of greenwashing. So we feel we are doing something good for the environment. Now, when you did that, people in the places where lithium is mined, they're dependent on their land, and their lands basically become infertile, and they can't do anything with that land anymore. Now, what that does, that forces them to work in those places, to work in those industries. So there was a land which belonged to their people. And when I talk about land, I don't mean the modern thought of like, hey, you owning this area of land, right? Think of land as a community. When the community gets impacted, individuals get impacted too. That land that belonged to the community is now infertile, and those people, that community to whom that land belonged, now is bound to work in those places which took away the land in the first place. So if you think about it, it's just binding those people, forcing those people to work in those places. And we do talk about history to talk about slavery. We talk about it as if it's a thing of the past, but it's nothing but a modern form of slavery, and that is epitome of social injustice, right? And even when you talk about water bodies, and Vinita might want to add about it because she does have a lot of thoughts about fishes, or like, fishes being harmed, because we as humans can do a lot of things. Vinita, if you would like to add on to it.
So it's just the fish. So there are a lot of factors that affect the pollution levels. Like I give this one basic example is like you go to any remote areas, they set up an industry. People set up an industry, and what they do is they pollute all the resources, be it air, be it water, everything. And whatever the people were dependent on those resources now do not have those resources for free. They have to work for it. Like you set up a water bottle company in Himalayas or anywhere, you put the industrial waste into the fresh water now, and the people who are dependent on those fresh water have to work for these industries to buy fresh water, because the fresh water has already been polluted by the industries. So they make you look as if like the capitalists are important for the economical growth. It's very important for them to be there. The industries are important because that provides people money or the growth. But honestly, what it does, it pulls them down. It takes away everything that was already free, and it charges them an extra amount and even the quality of their life. And that is exactly what even fast fashion industry is doing. The whole society now is so driven to the materialism or the materialistic world. And in that way, we have normalized the whole idea of consuming more and more. We keep consuming things like what trends I have seen around. They talk about buying new stuff all the time. If anything breaks, we'll just throw it away and we'll buy something new. We won't repeat our clothes. We won't use something which is a little defective. Nobody talks about the sustainability part of reusing, repeating, reducing. Like the basic example of the fast fashion industry is like the clothes have become so cheap because polyester has entered the market. Polyester that is again like plastic, a type of plastic. So polyester has entered the market. The textile industries have gone down. The textiles have gone down of the like pure organic cotton, be it organic cotton or other bamboo textiles. The demand for them has gone down because polyester has entered the market. The cloth that you would have got for like $1, now you just get it for like 10 cents. And people keep buying more and more of that stuff because it is so cheap. In that course, the people consume so much that they do not realize that this consumption is actually harming the environment, be it from the raw material that requires the resources, or be it the making of the cloth, which will again pollute the rivers and the air. Also, the dyeing part where they use chemicals. Also, the labor which affects to sell the product cheap, so they hire cheap labor. So people would be working for 18 hours and they would be getting such less amount in return. And it is only because of the overconsumption, people wanting to buy more and more and not repair what they have or anything as such. So I have seen that we have normalized this thing, because when I speak to my grandmother, she tells me that they would buy one cloth in 1 year. And today, when I see we are buying in 1 week, everybody's like, we are buying one cloth every week without thinking that what is going to happen, where it will reach. We don't even think about the landfills. That is another problem. The toxic chemicals that get into the ground, the soil, even the groundwater. Nobody talks about it. People look at the part where it is so beautiful. Why should we keep wearing the clothes? We can just buy another cloth. It is so cheap. And people get into this habit of buying more and more stuff, and people keep producing. That's why people keep producing more stuff, and that's how the consumption pattern has changed entirely, from we becoming from minimalist to materialists.
Yes, thank you, Vinita. One of the things I really appreciate about this course that you both taught together is that it is kind of case study rich. It gives a lot of examples of these things that are going on all around us that in many ways we don't even realize are happening. And if more and more people knew that these things were happening and how they were contributing to it individually, they would probably want to do something to change something about it. Which brings us to the policy side of the policy making. Maybe Pratik, can you tell us a little bit about what it is with regard to policy making, with regard to these and other examples, these very rich examples that you give in the course that you're teaching about? What do you want to say about policy making in this course? What is it that you teach?
When we talk about reimagining sustainability, Chris, there is a lot of myths that we need to break. The first myth is that people from privileged backgrounds are the ones who are leading this movement. No. If you look at, for example, the Wangari Maathai, if you look at the Chipko movement, for instance, right? So Chipko movement was led, and we speak about that in the course, by people specifically with a huge contribution of women to protect the forests in Uttarakhand. So who led the movement was people from these oppressed, marginalized communities who were pushed to the brink by the industries. Similarly, when you look at Mahar Satyagraha, which was spearheaded by Dr. Ambedkar, because Dalit communities did not have equitable access to water. Now, when they strive for these things, when they strive for protecting the forest, when they try to protect our lands, basically, when they try to protect our water, equitable access, what's happening is they are actually helping everyone. So these environmental movements, it also helps you realize that the thing, if you look at our thought, right? Now, me sitting in this room, I'm talking about something that will affect me in the future. But what they are doing is telling you, hey, this is affecting me right now. And this is an environmental issue that's affecting me right now. If someone doesn't have water to drink, clean water to drink, because it's all dyes in the water, they're talking about it right now. And they are the people who understand the most of the problems, because as we talk about impact sitting far away, they are talking about the impact that they are seeing on the ground level. So they see the most drastic impact of it. But unfortunately, those are not the people whose faces are there on policy making. They are not the people whose voices are heard. And that's why we also spoke about Vanessa Nakate, whose picture, when she was talking about the environment in the World Economic Forum, her picture was just cropped because she was a black person, a black African person from Uganda, right? And they had only 4 girls talking. So even when they are showing that, okay, we also have females talking about it, young females talking about it, there was a racial disparity. So their voices are not being heard. When you look at the boards of environmental organizations, 90% people on the boards are male. Most of them, even people working, even if you look at people who are not board members, most of them are male. And on top of that, most of them are males from privileged background, right? So what we are doing is, and now even if you don't look at it from a social justice point of view, purely from a policy point of view, people who have the best understanding due to the worst situations of what harms are being propagated, they are the ones who we are not listening to. It's as if you are driving a car, and what you are doing is I own this car, I have the privilege, I own this car, I am going to tell you about what to do with this car, how to repair this car. And the mechanic, who may not be the most privileged person, the mechanic is the one who knows more about that car. But what we are saying is, no, you don't worry about this. I'll worry about this. Only from the policy perspective do you see how ineffective this is. So it's not only a lot of disparity, a lot of social injustice, but also such an ineffective policy. So we need to involve voices when it comes to policy. We need to engage with all sorts of people from all walks, which ties into the idea of Aneka Antwad, where you listen to everyone and especially listen to people who know about it, right? Like, go to a doctor or listen to a doctor if you are sick. Don't listen to someone who is not a doctor. Don't listen to someone who just knows a little bit about health only from YouTube videos, right? So that's how bad it was. Same thing about Ladakh, and Vinita does talk a lot about it in Ladakh. Right now, you see some political protests in Ladakh, which they want the state to be declared a special state, like a Schedule 6 state, which I'll not go into details about. But what they're trying is, no one should be able to come, no corporate should be able to come and just take our lands and just destroy our lands, because our lands are being destroyed. Again, people who are fighting for it, they are the ones who are, in this case, marginalized, facing the brunt. They are the ones also giving you the solution. But we don't want to listen to the solution, and we are forcing them to protest. And this is where we are losing. We are just fighting amongst each other. We are fighting against the people who know about things, and we are doing our own thing. So it's not only socially unjust, it's one of the most ineffective things that we as human beings can do, Chris.
Absolutely, Pratik. I really appreciate the rich detail here that you've given on an issue that I think is worth thinking about and you teach about in the course. And it really asks the question of power and privilege and what we do with our privilege. And so you have people on the front lines, as you and Vinita have so well kind of articulated so far, who are experiencing the direct effects of the environmental degradation, pollution, and whatnot right now, and who may not even have a voice in the world of policymaking, so to speak. And I really appreciate that you brought up Ambedkar. Ambedkar rose up from within his own unprivileged social caste and class. He was trained as a lawyer, and he took his power and his privilege, and he advocated on behalf of his own people. And then you have other people who, and I think this is also really important to focus on, you have other people who have the power and privilege, but who may not be connected to those subaltern communities and those communities who don't have voices in the policymaking world, but very well could through the help of people who do, people of power and privilege. One person that comes to mind here in Switzerland, for example, is Bruno Manser. I don't know if you both have heard of him, but he was the one who went to live with the tribal people in, I believe it was in Malaysia. And in doing so, he helped advocate against deforestation for people who really didn't have a voice. So he took his power and his privilege, and he ultimately went missing for it. Nobody knows where he is and probably died for it, but really fought hard on behalf of tribal people. Of course, the question of representation and power and privilege comes up in this, of a white person, for example, representing people of color or people indigenous cultures. That's also always an issue. But when people really truly try to go in and raise up and lift up the voices of the people who are being held down, who are experiencing this environmental racism, I find that to be quite an important thing with regard to what you're speaking about, which is policy making, which calls into question a lot of those initial issues that your course brings up with regard to structural injustices and capitalism and people really being put on the sidelines within their own land, having their own land polluted. So with having said that, we spent a lot of time talking about lesson 5. I think it's an important one because one of the ways we can help people is through policy making, is through changing these structures. We also talked about making individual choices. ICOMO, for example, and Vinita has talked about this, we can make better individual choices in our personal behavior to deal with remediating environmental pollution. What I love about this course is in lesson 6, you seem to pull this all together. Lesson 6 is called A Call to Action, Personal Behavioral Change and Effective Advocacy. The purpose of life is to serve one another. And there you're quoting Parasparo Pagraho Jivanam from Tattvartha Sutra. And here, what I see you doing, and I'd like to hear from both of you about how you're connecting together personal behavior and connecting that to effective advocacy that also leads to these bigger structural changes.
So I'll just steal the mic before Vinita goes ahead. One of the few things that are important, Chris, is just like wake up, look at your day-to-day activities, and probably Vinita will talk more about it. Some of the things that we should change is like our food. Just start replacing some of the foods that we eat with plant-based alternatives. It's the easiest thing that we can start with, especially when we have access. And most of us talking, or like most of us listening right now, they do have access to like plant-based food. That's a very easy way. Again, and Vinita, definitely, I'm pretty sure you can talk more about it because you do talk about it like all your day, about how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because one thing that I noticed, Chris, is even when we eat like some chaat or when we had some street side food, I've seen Vinita just pluck a plant, like basically pick up a leaf from the ground, from a tree, just wash it quickly with water and just eat in that instead of asking the shopkeeper to give her a plate, to give her like a polyester or like a plastic plate. So she would just go pick up a leaf, just dip it in water, clean it a little and eat it. And that was like a fresh leaf. It was not like a leaf which is like decomposed or anything like that. So I thought that was nice, and I thought that was about being comfortable with being uncomfortable or like being standing out. So Vinita, do you want to elaborate?
Of course, something I keep doing that. I keep plucking the leaves, and if I have not carried something of my own, I usually make sure that I carry my own tiffin or my plate or my cutlery, my water bottle, everything, just in case if I miss someday. I do not want to use something use and throw. Throw is a culture where you are consuming something without even thinking what you're consuming. You're just using it and throwing it away. You have already wasted a lot of resources in that order. So like what we are used to now is like we go out, we'll be taking some chai, anything, like maybe milkshakes, people take coffees, they take use and throw cups, and they drink that and they just throw it away without thinking that everything, they look like paper cups, but there is actually there's a lot of plastic in it. Without plastic lining, the cup would like go away like this. It will not even last for like 1 minute. So yes, alternatives I talk about is how to switch for like all the basic needs, what things that you can use instead of like maybe a normal brush, you can use a bamboo brush. For the soaps, you can use uptan. So these are the changes that you can get into your daily life. Make sure that you carry your own water bottles when you're going outside, so that you don't need to go and grab a water bottle, which is again plastic, which it's not good for your health also and the environment both. Or maybe if you're going out with the purpose of getting something like some food from outside, you can always carry your own tiffin and you can ask them to put it in your tiffin and give it to you as a parcel. Something that you have to consciously change in your life. Like, there was this one experiment that I had tried, like get up in the morning and try to jot down things which you are going to touch, which is not plastic. So that was the time I realized that everything that we are touching or everything that we are having today is plastic. It's made out of plastic, be it the clothes we wear, the phone that we use, the laptop that we are using, anything. So when you do that, you will start understanding what all things you need to cut down, what things are necessary, what things are not necessary. Do you need to buy more? Do you not need to buy more? Is it good for your health or the environment? It changes all your focus. Your individual action will also make yourself feel so good about your contribution to the society, for the environment, and how you turn into a minimalist, and your happiness is not connected to the materials anymore. You will know your happiness is into serving, like you doing something good for the society in itself will make you happy. So yes, this chapter does talk about the individual changes, what you can do, and there are a lot that a person can do, and you can always keep adding up more.
Fantastic. Yes. As I hear you both speaking now, I'm starting to remember the IPCC, the last time they met in Bonn, Germany. They released a statement that basically said that the changes that we have to make in society have to happen at all levels. They have to happen at the individual level. They have to happen at the corporate level. They have to happen at the economic, political, and structural level. So we can't just be good consumers. We can't just vote for a better world. We have to do both, right? We have to advocate for the structural change, vote for the structural change that will lead to a more sustainable world, environmentally sustainable world, amongst other things. And we have to also change our own individual behaviors as well simultaneously. And I think that the South Asian traditions and the Jain tradition really don't see these things as separate. What we do as individuals has an effect on the greater whole, and the greater whole, of course, affects the individual. And oftentimes, both within and outside the Jain community, I hear people advocating for one or the other. Either it's all about individual change. Other people say, no, it's only about structural change and policy change. But what I see you both doing in this course, and I find quite innovative, particularly within the Jain community, is you're bringing together these concerns as things we can simultaneously change. And we have new opportunities to change given the manifold issues that we have with regard to environmental sustainability, pollution, climate change, and all of these things. And I really appreciate this. I really appreciate that this course is a global or transnational endeavor, with Pratik living in the United States and with Vinita living in India. Vinita is actually joining us from Rishikesh today. I know you're not from Rishikesh, Vinita, but it's really been a wonderful collaboration to get a kind of Jain-specific perspective from both of you that is at the same time kind of addressing global issues and is really a global collaboration between the two of you and Arihanta Institute, Jain Vegan Initiative, and ECOMO. So I really appreciate that you both took the time to speak with me today about the course, that you offered the course. People are welcome to sign up for this course. Course 106, Reimagining Sustainability, Jain Environmental Advocacy at arihantainstitute.org. I also encourage people to visit the Jain Vegan Initiative as well as ECOMO, and we'll try to include those links there in this podcast episode for people to be able to see. Before we go, though, I wanted to ask both of you, is there anything else you'd like to add that we didn't talk about today, or any final thoughts with regard to the course or anything with regard to Jain Vegan Initiative, ECOMO? Up to you. Over to you.
Yeah, Chris, I'll let Vinita end, but before that, I would only like to say that there are a lot of things that we can do if we are just a little mindful. We need to stop. The biggest takeaway for me is stop thinking about environment as a distinct problem. Start thinking about it as something that's happening now, and it's an existential crisis. Just look into the marginalized community, just look into the displacement, including of animals, and we will realize how important it is. It is probably one of the most pressing things, because if we don't act now, even people talking about the economy, down the line, it's going to be much more expensive, not only like money wise, but just like expensive to live. We won't be able to live. It's that drastic. And today people are not being able to live. I'll give it to Vinita if she wants to add something.
Yeah, I think that people need to stop being so awkward, socially awkward into doing the right things. People need to stop being so embarrassed about doing the right things in public. Anything, the changes that I just mentioned, try getting those changes. And once people start seeing you do it confidently, people also have that kind of confidence that yes, this is the right thing. I think I should do it. Just because somebody something is happening, like I had read once, that just because everybody is doing it, it doesn't mean that it is right. Even if one is doing it, and if you know that thing is right, join them. So once you start doing it, don't be awkward. Go ahead, be yourself. Just do what is the right thing. Be it carrying your own water bottle, be it carrying your own tote bags. Tell the shopkeepers that you do not want the plastic bag there, so that even they are more aware of the situation. Even they understand that what they are doing is harming their own place. And that can, of course, keep spreading. That's how I have spread these messages. Like, I know people who have transformed their life. They make sure that they do all those stuff. So I just want to tell people that don't be that awkward to do the right things.
Thank you, Vinita and Pratik. I think it reminds me of Gandhi's quote, to be the change you wish to see in the world, right? We have to be the change, and the change will definitely come, as Gandhi has shown us, and Gandhi, being inspired by Jain principles, did it, right? So from the bottom of my heart, thank you both, not only for coming on the Engaged Jain Studies podcast, but also for all the effort you put into preparing this course for us, which is now on our website. And everyone is welcome to enroll. And I look forward to working with both of you more in the future as we continue to expand all the educational platforms here at Arihanta Institute. See you again soon.
Thank you, Chris. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Engaged Jain Studies podcast, brought to you by Arihanta Institute, an IRC 501c3 nonprofit California corporation. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform, or better yet, tell a friend and share it with a colleague. At Arihanta Institute, we bridge ancient wisdom with contemporary living through accessible, self-paced online courses, free events, and a first-of-its-kind Master of Arts program in Engaged Jain Studies. Visit arihantainstitute.org to learn how our curriculum spanning Jain philosophy, social justice, veganism, environmental studies, and more can enrich your understanding of timeless principles in today's context. Jai Jinendra.